The Celtics Talk podcast is presented by 24autogroup.com. 11 locations across New England.
What's up, everybody? Celtics Talk podcast coming to you from the Auerbach Center. Have we done it?
Ooh.
It's been a while since we've done an Auerbach Center podcast.
It has.
Normally
I don't know if we ever have. This could be your first.
I've definitely done it, but those were the Ennis Freedom days. So,
wow.
Yeah, we're going way back.
That was a long time ago.
I am talking in hushed tones because, one, the Celtics season is over, and two, there are people working, and Abby has already made everybody mad. I was going to use other
This is an active workplace.
Fair. And,
Bring your headphones, people.
And honestly, if the Celtics wanted to make it more conducive to working, they should have built a section of this gigantic building that had stand-up potential.
There actually is a studio in this building.
And we're not allowed to.
We don't have access to it.
Occasionally. Yes. Okay, Abby.
Anyway.
Brad Stevens just talked. You're going to hear the full Brad Stevens presser at the end of this. You'll maybe hear my little one-on-one where we go a little bit more in-depth on a few of the topics. But start 10,000-foot view. What was your biggest takeaway from Brad's meeting with the media?
I am hopeful that while we may see some major changes, that I guess I feel like the Celtics have the right man at the helm.
Okay.
Brad is so good at seeing the big picture, but also understanding dynamics within the locker room, within a coaching staff. And as far as we've heard, I will say the only thing that I was different from the last couple of summers is that Brad was very clear that there would be no handcuffs put on as far as spending. And the CBA, I'm not saying that this has anything to do with the ownership change, but the CBA and the rules that are becoming a reality for this team are going to limit some things and force the team to make tough decisions.
Which we knew. And then I like the one thing I've tried to stress in the aftermath of the Celtics bowing in the season is that these changes were coming regardless of the outcome of the season.
Regardless of maybe the ownership change.
True. Like, it didn't matter who's writing the checks. It's getting prohibitive, and they need to make changes. My big takeaway was that Brad really is great at dancing around. He tried his best to avoid every real topic that we wanted to talk about, asking to wait until draft night, which maybe is an indication that, well, he said that he did not, I think he ended by saying he did not expect fireworks on draft night, and that his team
was pretty concrete about that.
Fair. Like, although he was careful with everything he said.
Absolutely. This is not his first rodeo.
No, I mean, he's really good at this is why he's a GM. But I do think the big takeaway was that it still stings.
I was going to say, that's my thing. Yeah. I'm still processing. I don't think I've fully wrapped my mind around the way the season ended, how abruptly. This is the first time that I have not been to an Eastern Conference Finals series in years. I still have no idea what I'm going to do, what to do with myself at this point.
What was the last time we were not in the East Finals?
2018?
Man. Rozier year? Like, I'm trying to think, what was that? Year after? Oh, no, they made it to it might have been 17.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Really?
It's that long ago.
Wow. Yeah. It's bizarre. And I keep going back to Joe Mazzulla reminding me not to make expectations. I just assumed we would be there, and I have not mentally prepared for this to happen.
What did you take away from the next game, since we didn't get your hot take on it afterward?
Right. I missed the next game because my daughter Mabel starred as Flounder in The Little Mermaid. She was phenomenal, and I got many texts telling me that I had made the right choice and not going to New York on Friday. But it was, in the vein of Joe Mazzulla, it was something I expected. I feel like a lot of NBA teams, you get that pop, that initial pop after your superstar goes down, and there's a burst of energy, and then it's just hard to maintain. I was surprised to find out that Jaylen Brown's injury was as significant in the partial meniscus tear.
But even so, Brad came out today, and I thought was one of the few things he kind of peeled back the curtain on, was saying that Jaylen's been dealing with this for a while, that this was
since
not
March.
New information, that he actually thought by the end of the playoffs it was getting better, so it wasn't something that hindered the team. That was my other big thing, is like, he was so careful not to take anything away from the Knicks or to find an excuse for why the Celtics are not still alive. I thought he was just very realistic, and yet we're all left. I think we all hoped that we'd have a little bit more idea about where it goes from here. And Brad is sort of leaving the door open for, we're going to sit down with new ownership. We're going to, evaluate all the options. And then I'll tell you what the path might be. Or more likely,
we will find out what the path might be when the moves occur.
Exactly. And that's tough, right? Because I think the hardest part for a Celtic fan is everything has been so definitive the last few years. We, just like you said, you could plan I would always plan that on my vacations or whatever we had planned would not start until the middle of June.
Chris, I'm not joking. I did not know that next weekend is Memorial Day because we just
We've never
worked through
celebrated it.
holidays.
Yeah.
No, we've never. It hasn't been something that matters to me on my calendar.
So yeah, it's just I think a lot of us came away today hoping for more answers, and we didn't get a whole lot of them. And again, because Brad just doesn't want to go there right now, and
he may not have them right now.
I mean, they've been planning for a while.
That's true.
So I think they have a good idea, but again, I think they're maybe. And the one thing we did sort of ask was about. Does the Tatum injury change the equation at all? And I think he was, again, I think he has to balance that line between a Jaylen Brown-led team could still be super competitive, and yet the reality is, like, in order to reset the penalties, in order to really set yourself up for the future, there might be some lean years in here where you have to, like, trim more than maybe we were even expecting. And so
that was one of the lines I noted, was he said, you have to give yourself the best opportunity when you can. And next season may not be that when.
I did like that when he was asked directly about Jaylen and whether he could lead a team, and he said, look, superstars get a lot of the credit, but he was confident that whether it's both Jays or one Jay or whatever, whenever you touch the floor with them on the court, you feel pretty good about your chances to win.
And reiterated that the Jays and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are the core of this team, which leads me to believe that
I would just be careful reading in too much to anything.
Really? Seismic changes?
The reality is, when you look at the way, when you try to crunch the numbers with two max salaries, it gets really hard around the periphery. And they got ahead of it.
But how do you battle for championships without those guys?
You got to change the way you do business. And it's going to become, maybe you can have a 1A and a 2A and a C3 or 3C. I don't know what I'm doing here. But you might not be able to have a 1A and a 1B long term. And that is going to be Brad's toughest decision moving forward about how this thing goes. Karalis, biggest takeaway.
Oh, God, biggest takeaway.
He is pondering it in the moment.
A lot of uncertainty.
Host of the Locked On Celtics podcast. Direct competitor.
Essay.
Have a seat.
But, yeah, bring it in.
Oh, Austin, would you like to join us as well?
Absolutely.
Austin, future of the franchise. Go.
You guys want my takes on the PGA Championship?
Yes, Scheffler was great.
Let's do this. Very awkward.
That was
entry.
an adorable moment.
It was.
With Scheffler's son.
It was. Sitting in the scorekeepers. Biggest takeaway.
Biggest takeaway. Well, I liked we blew games 1 and 2. The admission. He put off all of the next year type of stuff, which was, that's the one thing we're all waiting for, right? Like,
I just vetted for 8 minutes.
What's next? What's next? That's why there were like 14 cameras here.
Yep.
So we put off a lot of that stuff, which probably is like the biggest takeaway. Is like we didn't learn anything, we didn't hear anything, and the North Star is the championship, but North Star can be far away.
I think we learned that Sports Talk Radio can stop obsessing about Cooper Flag.
He was pretty definitive on that, saying that.
Shout out to Gary Washburn for being like, "Hey, you talked to Cooper Flag. Any fireworks coming up?" So that was cool.
I also I don't know if it's PTSD or whatever, but we've gone so long without discussing fireworks with like and Rick that like I was like, oh my God, we're back here. It's slightly
taking
concerning.
it out of our lexicon.
Yeah, but we are left just waiting for draft night to figure out what
draft. Well, I mean, I also like we've got 28 and 32 for now. So maybe those will be moving. Yeah, man. I don't think that we got any clarity at all. This was just we didn't even get much clarity on Jaylen or Jason or anything like that. It was just kind of like an admission that the Knicks series, between exit interviews and this, I think everybody in this organization feels like, man, we biffed this series, man. Those first 2 games were right there, and I don't want to bring up bad memories or whatever, but
I mean, too late, buddy.
But you win those first 2 games, the entire series changes. Do you even have the Jason Tatum injury do you even have some of the things that
This is what we
happen
do.
here?
After a loss, we invariably go back, and hindsight is 20/20 on everything. Like,
Yeah.
could you, like, if you don't put yourself in this position, does this happen? Does this happen? You can twist
Right.
yourself into a
That
pretzel.
whole
And I'm
butterfly
sure
effect.
that's why Brad Stevens has not slept for 72 hours
Right.
because you're left thinking about all of that.
I would rather have seen them win that series and lose to the Pacers in a hard fought, like you run out of gas, right? Like the Bluesmobile at the end, the
Falls
whole
apart.
thing just falls apart, and like the Pacers are just this. It's their year. Things are clicking. They're shooting like crazy. Tyrese Halliburton's playing great. You get the Aaron Nesmith revenge. We could all just kind of like, ha, okay, Aaron Nesmith is kind of funny. I think watching some of those Knicks fans celebrate, it'd be like, man.
So you're saying it's worse because it's the Knicks.
It's a little worse because of Bing Bong and all of that.
Did you wander out into what time did you leave the building?
I actually left early because they kick us out, which is a stupid thing that happens at MSG. Like they close, so they kick us out. 2 hours afterwards. So I didn't even I wrote my first piece and I was like, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go back to my hotel.
I somehow lingered.
Yeah, I don't know. They normally
Did
kick
you
us
walk
out.
through the pandemonium in the streets?
A little bit.
And it was still pretty crazy. Like, when
It
I
was
left,
crazy. There was a lot of trash everywhere, more so than usual in New York.
most of it had hit that poor Pacer fan in the Halliburton
I
jersey.
saw that.
Also, not cool to throw to throw things
Never.
at Brian Windhorst.
Yeah, what is it? You mean no one? Look, I had Knicks fans, I had Knicks people on my podcast. No one thought that this was going to go this way. Like, congratulations, you broke this 20 whatever year curse, whatever. Great, but to this whole modern social media driven, oh, you picked against us. Let me put you on my phone and be like, how do you feel now? Be like, look, you didn't even think you were going to win. You didn't think you were going to win. Okay, celebrate, but don't cross the line.
All right, you got your own podcast to yell
Okay.
about this for an hour.
Bye.
So
Thanks for having me.
we're out of here. Abby, any final thoughts before we go into take a little break? I mean, I'm not.
Have a good summer.
No,
Enjoy.
No, you can't say that because
Please try.
There's going to be news
what you can.
every week. We'll be right here with you on the Celtics
Yes.
Talk podcast. We will drag Abby in via Zoom and make her talk about this team. Not a lot of answers today, but here now you can listen to Brad Stevens and gauge what you will. All right, I'm going to try not to repeat all the same questions. I'm going to try not to put you in a bad spot. You can just reject me if necessary.
You can filibuster it.
You were good at it.
Yeah, thank you. It's the nicest thing anybody's said to me in a while.
I mean, what have the last 72, 96 hours been like, and what I guess as you try to process it all, what stays in your mind as you go through it?
Yeah, I mean, every year that you don't end up on top, it hurts, and especially when you have a great shot, and so. Certainly it stings. We're all stung by it. We're all thankful for the journey these guys did take us on, but, there's work to do, and that's the way that you look at it when you're in my shoes. And then, and I think everybody kind of feels that way.
Making no assumptions about what's to come, but if you just take this last 2 years where you knew when you brought it together, there would be a little bit of that window. What do you want the legacy to be of that group? And does having that championship make it easier to digest that little window?
I think, I said this last year, whatever the results are the results. The loss stings way worse than the championship feels good. And that's just the sick and twisted way I live.
You don't go look at the pictures and try to remember
yeah, I love it. And, I think, what does help that is probably time, right? And the people you did it with. The people here are again, I said this in there, the character in our room, player-wise, coaches-wise, everybody is so fun to be around every day, and that's what makes it hard that we're not continuing this year.
You said something that caught my ear in there was that the ability to get Jason into surgery quickly could have benefits long term. I'm not making you say a timeline. I'm trying to tread very carefully here.
Yeah.
But what is the benefit as it has been explained to you to do that as quickly as possible?
So there were just I forget what the exact benefits were because I'm not a doctor, but whether it was blood supply and different. Swelling benefits early on in those first 72 hours was the time frame that we were talking about. And, we were just fortunate to be there. And as far as at HSS, and I thought they did a great job. And our team doc, Tony Shenna, did a great job of helping organize it. And then we were there with Brandy and Jason and Jeff Wexler, his agent. And everybody was quick to make that call, and I think there's real benefit to that.
How hard will it be to keep him from going stir crazy? Like, as a GM, how do you?
No, he's going to be stir crazy. That's he loves basketball. He gets stir crazy. He'd be stir crazy even though, that our season's over and somebody else is playing. He hasn't missed a summer of playing for USA since I can remember, and so guy just loves to play. And so that's going to be hard for him. It's going to be a challenge, but. Again, I'm thankful we're on the other side of the surgery, and we are only up from here.
There's people look at running backs in the NFL and say, "Oh, they came back in 8 months." But then, do you worry that the people are going to try to put too much of an unreasonable timeline on him? And do you want to tread as cautiously as possible?
Yeah, no. This is about full recovery, and and helping him get back to feeling like himself ASAP. And ASAP can be as long as it takes. There is no timeline. There will be different, steps along the way that will then say, okay, you can move on to the next step. You can move on to the next step. But ultimately, I think that's the most important thing is let's let this thing heal. Let's rehab appropriately, and it takes what it takes.
You mentioned you guys are going to sit down, kind of figure out the future, but just give me the balance. The penalties being in the second apron versus the long-term penalties of getting below the tax. What kind of balance do you have to strike in your mind when you just look at the two possibilities?
Yeah, I think, I start with the basketball penalties part, which is, the second apron, and then you're weighing those against your chances of being a championship contender, and then you also, obviously, consider kind of where you are financially, and but I think one of the best things that we have going for us is we have a lot of good players under good contracts and guys that everybody knows. If we put all those guys out on the floor, you have a chance to win the next game, even without Jason. And so it becomes a lot harder to be that sustainably good without a guy of Jason's caliber. But I do think that. We just have a lot of winners in our group, and so we're lucky in that regard.
We know how competitive Joe is. What's your message to him as you go into the off season? You had high praise from him there. What did you think of the job he did this season?
Yeah, he did a good job, and as I said, we love Joe, and we're glad he's here. And my thing with Joe will be the same as it is every year. We'll see how this all shakes out, and then you'll see. What you can do to put everybody in the best position to go compete like hell, and that's what we're always going to try to do. And we've got so many good players and so many good people that I trust that we'll be in good shape.
Last thing, I guess, because I'm trying my best to avoid all the questions as well.
You're doing okay.
I appreciate that. See, that's the nicest thing anyone said to me.
Yeah.
So we're here for each other. Draft-wise, when you just evaluate the draft overall, regardless of where, what are your feelings on this year's draft class?
I think this year's and maybe next year's, well, maybe not next year, but this year's draft class more than any ever has been affected by the NIL and affected by the new pay-for-play. I think people in college, whether they're saying it or not, got ahead of the new NIL restrictions and kept people in school, and then there's a lot of people still deciding whether they're going to go back or not. But I think that this draft more than any other will probably be affected by that as far as the back end of the draft, and even into the late first, people will have really hard decisions to make. Do I come to the NBA and make this much money slotted for this many years, or do I take a huge payday from some school? And that's the world we live in.
And for a team drafting 28 and 32, does that change your maybe outlook of how, do you have to wait and see who elects to, stay in?
We've got a pretty good idea of who's staying in and who's not, but we've had several good players through our doors already that, I could see going either way. And in years in the past, would probably have chosen to stay because, the monies can be higher in some of these schools than the bottom of the 20s in the draft, which is
kind of crazy.
Good for them.
I lied. Last thing. What would your message to the fans be?
Yeah, no, listen, we're so thankful for everybody's support all the way through. It's been, as usual, you know it's such a special place, but every time you walk into the Garden or you go somewhere else and you see the green everywhere, it's amazing. And, I think that this team, though we came up short, I think the character, the competitiveness, the care factor, I think all that represented Boston well.
Thank you, Brad. We'll quiz you more on draft night.
Thank you.
Are you ready to enter the realm of affordable luxury? Drew Carter here at 24 Infinity of Plymouth, your go-to destination for affordable luxury.
Right now, lease a new Infinity QX60 Lux for just $569 a month. Or lease a new QX80 Sensory for $1099 a month.
Ready to trade and upgrade? You'll get top dollar for your trade. Visit 24 Infinity of Plymouth at 151 Samoset Street and online at 24infinityofplymouth.com.
First of all, appreciate everybody coming in. I think the majority of this will, from my standpoint, will focus on, what we just went through the season and everything else. And I know there will be a lot of questions about what's next, but I'll talk probably more about that at the draft time when we have a better idea after meeting with all the key stakeholders and everybody else about what next steps might be, right? At the end of the day, I think that will all be driven by the same thing that's always driven us, and that is how do we get ourselves in the mix to compete for championships best. And I think that we'll have more clarity as we take a deep breath, get a little bit more sleep than we have the last 3 nights, and then figure out how to be the best version of ourselves here moving forward.
Questions? Yeah. Brad, I'd just like to start with a guy like Jaylen Brown, who has won a title, has a contract, whatever, had his issues, maybe starting in March. How impressed were you with what he did? It just the gameness that he showed, that he wanted to play and continued to play, even if he's got a situation going on with his knee.
Yeah, no, listen, the good news is, I think, first of all, Jaylen wants to play. Jaylen's a competitor. Jaylen's a warrior. Jaylen, takes great pride in being out there. And at the same time, we also, he saw our team docs and a couple of other people, and as he even said a couple of weeks ago, the knee's in a good place structurally, and so I think he felt comfortable getting out there and going after it, and hopefully he'll feel better after being off of it for a couple weeks here. That's the unfortunate part, is we're done in middle of May, but some of these guys have some nicks, bruises, and other things that it'd be good to get some rest.
Brad, what is the do you know a treatment at this point for Jaylen, the plan there, and what is the outlook now going forward for him and Jason health-wise?
I don't. I think for everything Jaylen said to me and said here, I think that what I just said is probably the outlook. I mean, what was reported this weekend, that's been something that's he's had for a while, and it's been stable, and he's played with it, and so that's been several scans through and through. So we've known that for a long time, and he's known that for a long time, and but it just tells you these guys they care, they care about winning, they care about playing well, and again, I think that'll probably he'll drive that, but certainly we're thankful for how much and how hard he's played, but he was definitely experiencing some discomfort there in March. But, you guys all watched it in the last couple of weeks. I thought it got better and better and better. And I think he actually felt better. At least he told me he felt better at the end of the Knicks series.
And obviously, it's going to be a longer span of time without Jason here. How do you anticipate sustaining through that, and how big of a part is Jalen in kind of having some stability next year as Jason's going to be out?
Yeah, I mean, those guys have been the core parts of this whole program for a while. And so there's no question about that. And, those guys are, they've achieved so much and, and certainly deserve all the recognition and praise and accolades they get. But yeah, that's a huge part of us being the best version of ourselves.
Hey, Brad. For next season, you guys have a historic amount kind of committed to the core plays. I know it's a unique situation, as you alluded to, with the transition. When do you expect to have an indication of what your limitations, if any, you'll have for next season?
We'll talk about all that stuff in the next few weeks.
Is that how tough is it? There's not just that uncertainty then right now, not having kind of indication on that front?
Listen, we've been talking about this for years, right? I mean, the CBA has been well known for years, and so there are penalties associated with being at certain levels, and we know that. And you just weigh that. You weigh where we are, you weigh everything else, and then you make those decisions. But those are, you have to have the clarity of a full season and a full playoffs, and like I said, a couple of good nights sleep, and everybody gets in a room and put your heads together and figure out what's next.
Brad, how much did Jason's injury, how much does that impact what you are about to embark on this summer?
I think anytime you're talking about an injury like that, I think it's another piece of information that you have to ingest and figure out how that affects you moving forward, both next year and in the future.
And with the collective bargaining agreement, we all talk about second apron and blah, blah, blah. But what about the other end where teams that normally had cap space, where you would normally be able to say, hey, salary dumps, those don't exist the way they used to anymore. How much does the lack of that kind of trading partner impact what kind of moves that you have to make?
Again, we'll talk about all that stuff at draft. I'll have a better idea about all that stuff. But I would say that we have a bunch of really good players, and they're obviously under contract, and we want to first look at everything that we have here and, again, try to be the best version of ourselves here.
Brad, with everything Kristaps had to go through down the stretch of that season there, how tough was it to watch him have to go through that, especially considering, like you said, all the decisions you guys are going to have to make this summer and everything? And two, was there ever any clarity as to what exactly was going on? Or?
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody was more frustrated than him. And, I felt for him because he, the way it was described to me was just post-viral syndrome, which is just, lingering effects of a long illness. And, I think we've seen that and probably all read too much about that over the last several years. But I think that, unfortunately, I thought he had really turned the corner there towards the end of the regular season. When we went to Madison Square Garden, he was so good. And then even in the first round. And then for whatever reason, he just didn't feel as good there early in the Knicks series and never really felt great. Now, in the middle of a playoff series where you play every other day, it's not an ideal situation to feeling better, especially with the travel and everything else and the amount of, physical, force these guys put on their bodies. So, our expectation is that it'll probably be the next couple weeks will do him good to be off, but, he's going to play for Latvia. I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to be playing in Eurobasket and I'm sure it'll be well cleared up by then.
You mentioned that it popped up right at the end of the regular season or right before the postseason. Was there anything that triggered him not feeling well again, or was it just out of the blue he just started feeling bad?
Just out of the blue.
Brad, you guys have made the playoffs every year since 15 and been 7 or 8 Eastern Conference Finals. With your ego, in terms of you want to build a championship contender every year, but is there something that says, with the new CBA, with all the restrictions, with Jason's injury, like maybe we have to take a step back? Like there could be, like, are you in the brass? Were you kind of pointing to like eventually we're going to have to take a step back? Eventually, like how does that go when you want to tell Boston that they're going to have a championship contender every year, but that might not be sustainable.
Yeah, and I think the way that you say it is the North Star is to have a championship contender, right? And so you have to you have to do what's best to give yourself the best opportunity to do that when you can do that. And so we just have to look at it all and decide, how feasible that is on any given year, and then, make sure that we are, we're making the decisions accordingly. But the reality is like I said, we have a lot of good players. We're in a unique situation. They're all under contract. And obviously, as you pointed out, there are, several basketball penalties that will come with that amount of salary. And so we just have to weigh it all and make those decisions. And again, I'll have more clarity after we meet and talk and go through it.
But is that possible to continue every year under the restrictions to have a championship contender, or do you have to?
I never put a ceiling on a group of players. So, some years you put a group together that you think has a better chance than others, but we'll see how it all looks. But my goal is always and will always be to try to best position us to compete for championships.
Brad, you obviously helped Jason off the court there. It sounds like you were with him afterward with the surgery and everything. What was that kind of time period like, helping him get through such a difficult moment, and how has he kind of gone through it, the mental aspect of it right now, and how do you expect it to kind of progress physically over these next few months?
Obviously that's hard, super hard for Jason. I mean, more than anybody, as has been well documented, he loves to play. And I think even missing 2 games has been, grueling for him. And so we know that there's a long road ahead, and that there's going to be several steps that he'll have to take before he ultimately gets back out on the court. But the positive was we were 15 minutes away from, Dr. O'Malley, who is a terrific surgeon who has done a number of these. And Dr. Shenna was on the phone with him before we left the building on Monday night. And he was out of the MRI in consultation and done with surgery by the time we had an injury report the next day, because of there was real benefit to doing it early. And so it was as tough as that injury is, and as tough as it was that night, just an amazing set of circumstances, and an amazing thank you from our organization to, all of the, Dr. O'Malley, the nurses at HSS and everybody there, and the hotel that we were staying in, and the accommodations they made Jason feel comfortable in. And just I thought it was about as good of a transition and about a bleak, of a feeling as you could have.
And just when you look back at that series against New York, how do you kind of assess what do you think was missing? What do you think went wrong over the course of that series?
I'd rather talk about all the CBA and all that crap, but
you said no questions about that.
No, I know, but that's the first 10 questions were on it. You guys are terrible students. Listen, the reality is we blew the first two games, right? And that's why we put ourselves in a tough spot. I realize, and we all realize, listen, these leads go fast, these games go fast, but we had our opportunities, and so yes, you can win when you're down 2-0, but you've just diminished your margin for error, because there's going to be games like ours in Game 5 where we go nuts and we're hard to beat that night, or ours in Game 3 where we're hard to beat that night, but that just ties it. You still have to do that 2 more times. And so, that's not on any one person. That's not out of a maliciousness. That's not like a bad decision. It's not like bad luck. It's we had opportunities to win those first 2 home games, and we put ourselves behind the 8 ball. And New York gained what I thought was not only confidence but momentum, and like they are peaking. You can see it. And so, I think all 4 teams that are playing in these semifinals deserve to be there, and any of the 4 could win it. But credit New York for the way they played and the way they came back in those 2 games specifically.
Yeah, Brett, a bit of a repeat, I guess, but just curious, looking back and assessing this season, to you, what were the factors that prevented this team from ultimately reaching the end goal that last year's team was able to?
Well, I mean, again, sometimes it's as simple as those are the margins, what I just mentioned, from winning and losing. We lost an overtime game at home in game 1 and a game by 1 point in game 2 that, we were up 16, 18, 20 with 15 minutes to go in the game. So that's the margin of error that you're dealing with. And so I think that those are all things that, you appreciate when you can go on deep runs like we did last year and ultimately win it, because some things have to go your way. I've said many times, like we could easily have been up 3-1 when Jason got hurt. But the reality is, we were probably not winning that game anyway, so we were going to be down 3-1. Last year in the Indiana series, they could have easily been up 3-1 on us. And I think that's just kind of these series. You get these opportunities, and one team takes advantage of them, and that team usually moves on. And the Knicks did that. And again, they deserve credit for that. They've been amazing late in games, and certainly played a lot of those in the Detroit series and showed it against us.
Brad, when the guys were leaving, like this week, over the last couple of days, they've been kind of seemed to understand the circumstances like this offseason. Have there been any conversations about what's to come, or do they just kind of understand it?
I think when we do exit meetings here, we do just get together as a team, do a quick 10-minute thank you, and then hug, and everybody goes their own direction and takes a deep breath, just like I said about our staff. And so, but all of those guys are, have been told my door's open, my phone's on, anything that I can do to talk through anything as we continue to move forward. I'm always open to that. And listen, we have an amazing group of guys. This is what makes it hard when you come up short, is because, and people, and I know people say that all the time, but the character in the room is just incredible. They are, and they're the kind of guys that, they can go in any gym, anywhere, and win any one game. We just didn't do it enough.
Brad, with Jaylen Brown potentially being without Tatum for most, if not all, of next season, what is your confidence level in his ability to kind of keep you guys afloat and lead you guys and be as competitive as possible without the guy that's kind of been by his side for most of his career?
Well, I think, first of all, and I know that we always talk in terms of superstars and, don't talk in terms necessarily of the other 13 players, right? And so the reality is we have a ton of good players, and everyone leans on everyone. That said, Jaylen and Jason have gotten, the majority of attention because of how good they are. And I have full faith that any game that you have, those guys on the court, or one of those guys on the court, you have a great shot. And so I have full faith in Jaylen.
You brought up the 3 sleepless nights. What has been the process for you guys as you sort of recalibrate after the last week and a half with Jason's injury and then losing to the Knicks? How does the front office get together and kind of work things through after something that really probably is going to shift the way you think, or at least has the potential to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk when you're in this role, you talk, big picture, branches, and long term all the time. But then, at the end of each season, you glean a little more clarity from the season that just happened and what happened during it, right? So again, I like to give everybody a few days to take a deep breath, because you don't want to make decisions that are rash or emotional. And we've got a lot to sift through and sort out and think about, and we'll do that. So there'll be a lot of us in the room, and we'll take the time over the next couple of weeks to do that.
Do you believe that championship windows are shrinking, especially under this CBA, even compared to the latter half of this decade?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I think it's it's something that I think I think certainly it is more challenging if you in certain circumstances, for sure.
Hey, Brad, obviously you mentioned you'll plan through things through the draft. I'm just wondering, how does the draft, I guess, the prep for it fundamentally maybe change just because of the things you guys are going to have to make decisions on, just, having the 2 picks coming up here?
I don't think it changes at all for us. We'll evaluate who we think will be available at 28 and 32. We just got done with 2 draft workouts today. And so we'll have plenty of time to thoroughly evaluate who we think those people might be, and if we want to try to move up, try to move back, whatever. We'll see how it kind of all goes. But nothing, I think when you're at 28 and 32, there's nothing, you're not exactly able to pinpoint exactly how that night's going to go.
Brad, I'm curious your thoughts about the difference in style of play between the regular season and the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's pretty significant.
Yeah. So is that good, bad? Like, it feels like you've played 82 games under one style.
Oh, you're talking about our style?
No, I'm talking about just the NBA. I'm talking about your style. I mean, it could be anything, but I'm talking about the officiating is different. Certain things are allowed, not allowed. It feels like the style of play in the regular season, 82 games, was one thing, and the playoffs across the board have been kind of like a different style of basketball. And maybe that impacts your style of play. How do you see that? Do you think that something should be more consistent between the two, whichever way?
Well, no, I don't want this misconstrued by any means. There are absolutely no excuses. Both teams are playing under the same set of guidelines with the same whistles and everything else. So that is what it is. But it's clearly more physical. I think that, a lot of us as we watch it probably like that, but there's a line, and I think that, in the Orlando series especially, I thought that I'm not sure that if we played 82 games like that anybody would be left. But I think that, we just have to, my biggest thing as a league is making sure we don't, we give the defenders the right to hold their ground. First and foremost, you have to have the right to hold your ground. But I think we've gotten back to a lot of the grabbing and holding that, makes it harder to move. And so hopefully, those things get ironed out. I know our officiating groups in the NBA work on that all the time, and that's not it's not an excuse at all for us. I'm not sure that we were hurt by it nor benefited from it. I just think that we got beat. So, but I do think that it is more physical.
I wasn't trying to make an excuse for you guys, but as a talent evaluator, as a person who's evaluating what kind of team to build, you can build
linebackers.
That's right. I mean, you're building a team for the regular season, or the play. If there's two styles of play, does it change?
Yeah, you're always thinking that. You're always thinking that way. Listen, when the rotations shrink in the playoffs, which not everybody's shrunk. I mean, I think there's some teams that are playing probably more guys than normal, and I think that all of that is stuff to look at. But when the rotations shrink generally, I think it's largely because there is an even increased intensity level, right? There's an increased physicality level, whether no matter what is said. And you just have to match that, and the very best athletes match that, right? And so that. And so, you're thinking about, everybody has these discussions all year where, yeah, that's a person that's in our top 7 or 8 or 9 in a rotation. That's a playoff. You could see that playing in the playoffs. And then there's other guys that you think, okay, we want them to work up to that, or maybe we think they can get up to that. And yeah, that's a real thing.
Brad, with everything that's gone on in the coaching world, like the last couple months, like Michael Malone in Denver, Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, like it feels like there's never been a time where there's more uncertainty than there is now. So I'm curious, as someone who was in that world for so long, what do you make of this new era of like how quickly coaches get fired at weird times? And then two, how pleased have you been with Joe for the past 3 years?
Yeah, Joe's great. Joe's done a great job. I don't think anyone in coaching ever thought it was certain. So I think uncertainty is what you sign up for in some ways. But listen, there's so many things that go into winning and losing. And, you know, coaching's part of it, right? But, you know, playing, circumstances, injuries, you know, whatever the case may be, there's so many things. And so that's why I think it's so important to, like, I know how hard their jobs are. And I've felt for Taylor and for Mike. You know, and obviously talked to both of them. And but every year, you know, good coaches get let go, and they're way better than everybody talks about them. I'm just telling you because I coached against them. They're way better than everybody thinks or knows. So, but that's the reality of our situation because that's the way the world works. And then, you know, there's other coaches that are really good too that'll get their opportunities. And but yeah, we're lucky that we have Joe here. We're lucky that we have the staff we have here, and we're thankful.
Brad, you got 28 and 32 with the draft.
We do.
There's
right now.
Yeah, right now. There's rumors that you talked to 2 guys, one who's projected to go number 1, you've interviewed, and the other one's another lottery pick. Like, do you expect around the league fireworks to kind of happen on draft night? You said get back to you on draft night. Do you expect the draft will be able to determine some things?
So the way that this does, we can rank who we want to talk to, and the people we know we can't get in to work out is how we decide who we want to talk to at the combine. Otherwise, we may never get to talk to them again. So the only people that'll come in and work out for us are people that think they're between, you know, in our range, or maybe they're at the bottom end of our range, or whatever the case may be. So that doesn't really have anything to do with any of that. Will there be fireworks on draft night? I can't imagine, but you know, again, who knows? I wouldn't guess with us, no.
But in terms of like, there's a player in Milwaukee who might be moved. Like, there's a lot of stuff that go on. Could eventually, you want to speak, but that you could be a part of. You could jump in. Is that something you have to look out for?
I think generally, you know, one of the concerns with the new CBA was it might limit trade activity or movement, and I don't know. I don't think necessarily in the big picture that's the case. I think they're, you know, no specifics at all. But I wouldn't be surprised to see movement continue to happen across the league. But, you know, as far as us and moving up to those levels in the draft, I would guess that probably is not on the table.